Okay, so everybody loves bread. Bread is the most widely consumed food in the world. Every religion, race, and country eats some form of bread. It has been used as a peace offering in religious ceremonies, as gifts to royals, like in 1683, a bagel was given to the King of Poland as a thank you gift. But it's also been in use of tragedies. In the Great Fire of London in 1666, it was supposed that a baker started that fire, as well as in 1789, mobs calling for bread actually helped to trigger the French Revolution. I love bread. I have taken a lot of courses on the subject, as well as religiously watch Food Network. So I'm going to share a little bit about this with you guys. I'm going to go through three main topics. The first being the history of bread, the second being the different types of bread and flour, and the third being how to correctly knead your dough. So first we'll go through the history. Bread's been around for around 30,000 years. The first bread was used with roots of ferns. They would crush it up in a mortar and pestle, add some water, and it kind of made a paste or a gruel. And then they'd throw it on a hot stone and bake it. So it didn't have a leavening agent, didn't have any yeast or anything to make it fluffy like we have nowadays. So it was more like a flatbread. The earliest breads that did have yeast was in Egypt in 300 BC. It was also used as currency in Egypt. Yeast was brought into Egypt in 300 BC, making the fluffier breads that we know today. The most common bread is, of course, the sandwich bread that you can get in a grocery store. When it was first introduced, it was not pre-sliced. The manufacturers didn't think anyone would really want it that way, and so they didn't even bother with it. Especially because for women and children, it was supposed to be a thin slice with no crust, and for workers, it needed to be a thicker crust, a thicker cut with a lot of crust. Until a jeweler in 1917 did invent the pre-slicing machine. He presented it, and nobody really was interested. They're like, no, nobody's going to want this. And so they didn't actually start installing them until 1928. And then once they did, within 2 years, 90% of the bread that you see in stores today, or 90% of the bread bought, was pre-sliced. And that's just one type of bread. There are obviously lots of others, which brings me to the types of breads and flours that we use for them. There are over 100 different types of bread, and the reason that they're all so very different has to do with their flours. So I'm going to go a little bit into the four basic ones that you'll see. The first one is the all-purpose flour. Everyone kind of has that in their house. It's used for the most basic of breads, sandwich breads, biscuits, just your general, hey, I made some bread today. There's also the bread flour. It brings a lot of structure. It's been called the underwire bra of the bread world. And it has a different chewy base for the bread, which is why it's used a lot in pretzels and bagels. There's also the pastry flour, which, while used for most sweets and sweetbreads, is actually really good used for breadsticks. It makes it very moist and gives it a nice texture. Lastly is the rye bread, or rye flour. Obviously it's used for rye bread, but it's really good used for formation like sourdoughs. It's really good with those, and it also lasts a lot longer, so it's good for taking for travel. Lastly, I'm going to show you how to knead dough, and this is provided by thekitchen.com. So what you want to do is get a clean surface and get some flour and just kind of sprinkle it out on here. And dump your dough. So this has been kneaded a little bit already before, but I'm just going to show you a little bit of what the basic technique is and a few tests to see when it's complete. Right. So first what you're going to do is get some flour on your hands, get some flour in the dough, stop it from sticking to everything. And then with the heel of your hands, you're going to push it away from you, and that activates the gluten strands. So you push it away, fold it back, and keep doing that over and over again. You can start, folding different sides in. Depending on your hand size, if you've got big giant hands, you might only have to use one. If you got, smaller hands, 2 hands usually works best for pushing it out. So you'll do this for about 10 to 15 minutes total. When you notice it's not as sticky, that's when you can stop adding all this flour, and it'll start to have kind of a silky sheen to it. Like I said, about 10 to 15 minutes total. The way to check when it's done, it won't be done on this point, but I'll just show you guys just so you know. If you poke a hole into it, it should bounce right back, as well as doing the gluten window pane test, which what you'll do is you'll grab a little piece. Like I said, it won't be as sticky at that point. And you just kind of stretch it as thin as you can, and you want to kind of get a window that doesn't break, like this one did. It should be so thin that you'll be able to read a newspaper through it. So now that I've gone through all of that, I've gone through the history of the bread, different flours, and how to properly knead. Go get your ovens on, get baking, and make history. Please do not start any fires or revolutions.